We're on.
Terrific.
Okay, this is Ehana Kako. I'm Jay Fidell here in our studios in the Pioneer Plaza at the core of downtown Honolulu, and we are joined today by two of my favorite people, Kelii Akina, who joins us from Shanghai today, or is it Beijing? I can't tell.
This morning I'm in a city called Shenzhen, which is right outside of Hong Kong.
Okay, and on the other screen, Shenzhen, okay. On the other screen, you will see Malia Blom Hill, and she joins us from the Beltway in Washington, D.C. And today's show is entitled, no surprise, Grassroot in China, number 3. So welcome you guys to the show. I'm going to turn it over to you, Kelii. Take it away from here.
Thanks. It's already tomorrow in China, and that's always the case. And Jay, in Honolulu, what time is it there? It's yesterday for me, but it's Monday.
Just after 2 p.m., just after 2 p.m.
Isn't this incredible? Here we are, Jay Fidell with ThinkTech Hawaii in Honolulu, and Grassroot Institute, Malia Blom Hill in Washington, D.C., our top policy researcher, analyst. And of course, I'm representing Grassroot here in China. Well, you know, just top of mind, Shenzhen is one of 4 major cities here in China, and it's unique in that it is the first special economic zone. That has a lot of relevance to us in Hawaii because the whole concept about Shenzhen is let's create a place where government doesn't interfere with the economy. Isn't that incredible?
Refreshing.
Yes, and so they went to the drawing board. I mean, and this is really after some of the initial thinking by Zhou Enlai and Richard Nixon back in those days, in the 70s and the 80s, and then Deng Xiaoping initiated some reforms. And about 30 years ago, China decided to say, you know, what would happen if we created a place where the government was not the driving factor in the economy, but market forces, supply and demand, competitive free enterprise took place. And so they took this little sleepy fishing village known as Shenzhen, right across the river from Hong Kong. And they decided that they would allow an economic zone to exist. As a result, it has grown from a small few 100,000 to 9 million people. It is the center of enterprise. It is considered one of the major cities for any kind of foreign investment in China. And before we get into why Shenzhen succeeds and why that's important for Hawaii, Malia, maybe I could ask you, what are some of the problems that happen in a place like Hawaii when the government takes an increasingly larger role in regulating and in being involved in any way the market itself, the economy?
Well, you know, that's really the heart of what Grassroot is about. You know, as government grows, individual rights shrink. That's just true of, you know, individual liberties as it is true of economic freedom. And, you know, that it stifles creativity, it stifles innovation. There are, I don't know, countless examples of where government interference in industry has basically choked out free enterprise, innovation, and, you know, in some ways just sort of destroyed that altogether, particular industries or advancements. One of the examples people like to talk about is, you know, things like medical advancements in vaccine and such, where government oversight is, and in that has basically taken away the motivation to look for new cures. But it can be seen across the board. You know, there's a joke that when you if government was in charge of the auto industry, you would have, you know, every car would be an Edsel, and we get to see what happens now when government is in charge. Well, is putting their 10 cents in there, but
that's right. In fact, we can actually see now in Detroit some of the results of years and years of protectionist practices in the auto industry, which ultimately helped to decimate the robust economy that Detroit had. And of course, your and my favorite topic, the shipping shipbuilding industry in the United States. 1920, we decided to protect it, right? And require that the only ships that could be used in port-to-port transport in the United States had to be built by our own American shipbuilding industry. It had to be manned by our own union workers and had to be owned by our own country. And as a result, Malia, tell everybody what has happened to the greatest shipbuilding industry on earth at the time of World War I to the present day.
We've now fallen to, I mean, barely alive, I would say. We barely have a pulse as a shipping industry. We produce significantly fewer ships, and what we do produce is expensive and not as well done. America we go through these spasms of protectionism, historically speaking. And most of the time we kind of recover our sense, realize, oh, this isn't working out so well for us, and correct course. But when there are other interests involved, which is what we're talking about with that Jones Act and those cabotage provisions, we can hold on to this legislation from 1920, or legislation from 1920. The whole world changes. We have a world war. The way we ship things, the way our international trade is, the way we communicate changes, and yet we are bound to a piece of protectionist legislation that came out of an era that is unrecognizable to us.
That's right.
Astounding.
And it comes full circle in terms of what's relevant to Hawaii and what Grassroot Institute is keeping its finger on the pulse beat on, and that is the Jones Act. Today, it's still in effect, this 1920 maritime law that restricts shipping between American ports. And as a result, Hawaii is the hardest hit state in the entire United States because we're surrounded 360 degrees by what? By water. And the only way that supplies can get to us, and that's 95% of everything we consume, is through shipping. And that, according to Bloomberg Journal on January 1st of 2013, adds an estimated 1/3 to the cost of everything that we buy. It's just incredible. It affects housing, it affects shopping, and ultimately it trickles down into the homelessness problem, into so many areas, including the brain drain. Patty and I have 4 wonderful children, 3 of whom are out of our house, and those 3 are probably not coming back to Hawaii until they earn enough money for a mortgage, which will probably not be for another 50 years if it's in Hawaii, thanks to the Jones Act. And but let's just bring this all together, because at some point or another, I think Jay is going to tell me we have to take a break. We're here in Shenzhen, China, right now. A place where China decided to say, what would happen if we removed much of the protectionism? And I'm looking out into the port the other day, and I see dozens and dozens of ships unloading cargo, loading cargo. It's an incredible sight to see that there are dozens of shipping lines that come in and connect this city to hundreds of cities across the world, where in Hawaii we've got 2 shipping lines, one with a virtual monopoly that connects us to very few cities, and that's because of the protectionism. And so when we come back from our break, Jay, are we needing to take a break yet, or are we going to keep talking for a few minutes?
No, we have a few minutes more, Kelii, but let me add something, though.
Yes, please.
The forces, the political force, if we started, say, at the American Revolution, at the formation of the country, there wasn't a whole lot of government regulation. It was pretty much a free market, I think. But as time went by, we developed more regulation, and there had to be all this tinkering and laws and regulations. And now, every time you look, there's something new. You go to law school and your education is old in 6 months. And so the forces that built the protectionist structure that you guys are talking about, strong political forces, they're not going away anytime soon. So yes, Grassroot has a great idea. Let's return to a free market to the extent we can. But there are all these vectors and forces pulling and changing the law for largely self-interested purposes. Maybe some people say that's the American way. We have constituencies who make demands on the system, and they are able to mount a legislative effort that will change the law. So how do you see this unfolding? It's hard to change
Well,
the
this is
Jones
great.
Act. It's hard to deregulate. It's hard to make a free market. You know, you have to remove a lot of things that are making an unfree market.
That's a great question, and one of the ways in which we can learn to answer it is to observe the way China asks that question. I mean, for us to sit in the United States in a place like Hawaii and say, we can't change a federal law that causes protectionism. The forces are so great, the political forces that reinforce that federal law, such as the Jones Act lobby, the campaign funding, the monopolistic protectionism, the monopolies that are protected in Hawaii. We can say what your favorite saying is, shikata ganai, it can't be helped. But take a look at China. That problem is so much more massive. The exponential scale of saying in China, how can we change things, is so much greater than in the United States. It's incredible. And so we can actually learn a lesson from the way advocates in China are approaching the problem. And one of the ways they're doing this is by finding small little areas in which to have small little successes, so that there will be a cumulative number of successes. One such strategy is the establishment of special economic zones, in which the government does pull back and stop the protectionism, in which the market is allowed to work, in which the government establishes laws that protect businesses from government. And we've seen that happen in Shenzhen, and as a result, it's a miracle, really, here. You can see massive differences in lifestyle between Shenzhen and Beijing. Shenzhen has a stock market. Shenzhen now has a growing middle class where people are involved in mutual funds and stocks and the very things that we are in America. And in addition to that, Shenzhen is being used as a model for other cities. So this is something that's wonderful. It hasn't changed China completely, and the government hasn't stopped trying to tamper with it. But the fact is, there is a virus that has started in these special economic zones. And right now, as you realize, in the last few months, the big news has been that Shanghai has been set up to become a special economic zone. And we're going to see more of this take place. So in short, we can't tackle a big problem of changing central command from the top. But what we can do is take little steps. And one of those little steps in Hawaii is perhaps exemptions for particular industries with respect to the Jones Act. For example, liquid natural gas. We can easily get an exemption for that. Alaska has about a dozen exemptions for particular industries. This doesn't change the federal law. This doesn't create a radical shift from top-down control, but it starts the process of opening up the market. And once the benefits are realized by everybody, it's hard to go back on. It creates a kind of a viral effect. So one of the strategies we're pursuing at Grassroot Institute is an open approach to Jones Act reform. We're not saying the only way to do it is through litigation in court, although I personally, not as Grassroot, but personally, am a plaintiff on the federal suit against the federal government, that is, with respect to finding an exemption for Hawaii and non-contiguous states on the Jones Act. But we're not saying that's the only way. We're not saying that a modified reform from our friend Michael Hansen, by modifying the plank that says ships could be built outside of the United States and purchased. We're not saying that's the only way. Perhaps there are some particular exemptions for industries. The thing is to, in answer to your question, Jay, we can't change central control from the top down, but we sure can have vital economic activity by starting small and letting it go viral. And that's what we're seeing in China.
Well, to answer your question, Kelii, and your question, as I recall, was, when are we going to take the next break? The answer is now. This is a Hanakako. We have Kelii Akina from Shenzhen on the Skype, and also Malia Blom Hill from Washington, D.C. on the Skype. We'll be right back after this break.
We want to thank our underwriters. Hawaiian Electric Company and its affiliates Maui Electric on Maui and Hawaii Electric Light Company on Hawaii Island are deeply committed to the communities they serve.
Galen Ho is a senior executive of BAE Systems, a global defense, security, and aerospace company.
The High Tech Development Corporation, the state's leading technology agency, attached to the Department of Business, Economic Development, and Tourism.
Castle and Cook Hawaii, with a time-honored legacy that spans more than 160 years and revolves around its mission of investing in Hawaii, creating communities, and providing for the needs of our state.
Hawaii Gas, formerly the gas company, a proponent of the Liquefied Natural Gas Initiative, helping Hawaii achieve its transition to clean energy and a better energy future.
Collateral Analytics, a Hawaii-based tech company empowering the real estate industry with greater and faster access to the tools and data they need to make better informed property investment decisions.
I'm Nicole Horry. Thanks so much for joining us on ThinkTech.
I'm Maria Kashem. See you next time.
We're back, we're live, we're ThinkTech, and we're doing a Hanakako here on a Monday afternoon at the 2 to 3 block, but that's 2 to 3 here in Honolulu. We actually have Malia Blom Hill in Washington, D.C. For her, it's the 7 to 8 block, and we have our leader, Kelii Akina, in Shenzhen, and for him, it's in the morning. So let's get back to the discussion on a Hanakako, ladies and gentlemen. Oops.
Sorry. Going off of
Kelii is just sitting back. Okay. Sorry, Malia.
Oh, no. I just wanted to jump off of something Kelii was saying earlier about, different ways that we're looking at making a change for Jones Act, because it's true, there is substantial opposition. Substantial doesn't even really cover it. It's mostly organized labor and trial lawyers. And if you have any, even the smallest knowledge of lobbying in Washington, or even if you just like political dramas and such, that those are powerful lobbying constituencies. And every time this has come up in Congress, it's true, there has been an effort, and a pretty effective one, to shut it down, because it's trial lawyers and labor that most benefit from the existence of the Jones Act. But the thing that I find a lot of hope in is that the effort against it is something that's really only becoming organized. We're still kind of at the stage where in our different areas we know we have a problem. Here in Hawaii we know we have a problem. We're trying to figure it out. Puerto Rico, they know they have a problem. They suffer from the Jones Act too. They're trying to quantify it, in order to make the case about it. Ironically, even in the mainland, and here's where I think it could use the most help in organizing it, because it's so disparate, it's not as concentrated and obvious. Things like importing feed from Argentina instead of other places, instead of the U.S., because it's cheaper for American cattle owners and such to get feed from another country because of Jones Act provisions. It's cheaper to get salt from out of the country to put on your roads in the winter than it is to get it from Ohio. These kinds of things. The Jones Act is also considered, at least in part, responsible for basically the slow destruction of the refinery industry in the Northeast U.S. All these little teeny interests, we are kind of scattered, but as the momentum is building on it, and everyone in their different areas is raising their hand and saying, hey, you know what, that is really economically damaging to us too. I think that we have the potential to grow a coalition of all these different interests that are all affected by the cabotage provisions of the Jones Act. I mean, even environmentalists have an interest. It's a sort of odd partnership. But during the spill in the Gulf a few years back, the Jones Act became an issue because it was a question of whether we could use, which ships we could use to clean up an environmental spill. It even kind of touched on that. So there's interests out there on doing this. It's not, the opposition seems monolithic. It's well organized, and it has decades in creating that opposition. But if we know anything, we know that in American politics, it takes time, but if you can reach the public with your message, if you can sway the voters, you can eventually reach the politicians, no matter how powerful the lobbying.
Let me offer this on that, Malia. It takes time, but sometimes we don't have time, and we're spending a lot more money than we should just to survive our families because of the Jones Act. I agree with you guys. But what we have is a strange syllogism. You know about syllogisms, right?
Oh, absolutely.
He's a philosophy professor, of course. So the syllogism is that we all know the Jones Act is hurting our economy. It's a sieve, dropping our money out for the wrong purpose. And we all know that we need to change it, repeal it, amend it as far as Hawaii is concerned. Very clear. We all know that the fastest way in terms of the timeline, Malia, is to go to Congress. And we have a delegation in Congress that could advocate for the state and that could make an effort every day to try to change the Jones Act as far as it affects Hawaii. But they don't, because the delegation is flatly opposed to any change in the Jones Act. I don't think there's a single member of the delegation that would go to any, take any political risk.
Yeah, well, that's more. They actually receive money from Jones Act interests.
Yeah, and even though the interests who oppose change to the Jones Act are not here, those interests are on the mainland. I mean, except maybe Matson. I suppose Matson is here. But the point is that the delegation is completely sewn up. If you had the delegation working for this issue, working to improve it for the people of Hawaii, then the timeline you described, Malia, could be much faster. Without the delegation, we will have to take a long time to build public support, maybe even build public support to change the delegation before we get to square one on changing it in Washington and Congress.
Well, Jay, you are suggesting political change in terms of what the electorate needs to do. There are some things that Grassroot is able to do and some things we don't do. First of all, we don't endorse candidates, we don't endorse particular parties, and we don't finance them. But that said, there's a very important role for nonprofit organizations like our own, including yours, and that is to make voters aware that they do have power. To educate voters that we have a tremendous resource here in Hawaii. It's the fact that we have the lowest voter turnout in the nation. What that means is that we've got a great vast pool of people who, if they got motivated and educated and interested in being part of the process, could actually change things, because it's only a tiny part of the population that is keeping the current leadership in place. Moreover, Hawaii is the cheapest place in the nation in which to buy a congressional seat. Did I say buy a congressional seat? No, I didn't mean it that way. But when you really take a look at the fact that you've got 2 congresspersons here in this tiny population, the costs of media and commercials and other kinds of promotion needed to elect anyone actually are only a fraction of what it might be in another state. And I think that with that recognition, I'd like to encourage voters to have hope. And the role that we want to play in Grassroot is to say there is a need, and that need is to change our economy. But there is a way, and we can do that by bringing change to the Jones Act. Now, whether it is a big change that may come through Congress or small changes, I think we can move forward. The lesson we can learn from China is this: something so monolithic as China is going through a transformation. Something with such massive central control as China is being affected not by the change of central control, but by the fact that certain economic practices are now moving throughout China, one of which is free market enterprise via the special economic zones. And the lesson we can learn in Hawaii is that we don't have to win the entire battle. We can win small little battles, and they can eventually be like cracks in the dam and actually result in real change in the long run. Now, let me shift gear here a little bit. One of the wonderful delights of being here in China is meeting with free market thinkers. And you might be surprised at how many free market thinkers there are. There are institutions here that are committed to creating free market solutions. In Hong Kong last time we were on the show. We talked about the Lion Rock Foundation, our sister organization there. But here in China, in Beijing, and in some of the major cities, we have the presence of other groups, and I've had the opportunity to work with them and speak at them. One is the Tianzi, we call it in China. Tian, like in heaven, Zi, Tianzi, the idea that there is something greater than the state to which government needs to be and people need to be accountable. It's called the Tianzi, translated Uni Rule. Uni Rule Institute for Economics has achieved a tremendous level of respect nationwide here in China, and it's a true free market think tank. That they formulate solutions for moving the economy of China forward in terms of free market principles. We were at a dinner recently with the principals of the organization, the chairman, president, and others. You know what the conversation centered on? Friedrich Hayek, Milton Friedman, other great free market thinkers. We made an agreement. We have now a formal sister relationship between the Grassroot Institute and the Uni Rule Institute of Beijing, and they will be coming in 2014. We have been selected to be the site of their annual Friedrich Hayek dinner.
Wonderful.
I know, Jay. It's going to really attract the entire populace of Hawaii. It'll be as big as our Milton Friedman dinner. But I just wanted to say that the ideas of free market Austrian economics and free markets are flourishing amongst the intelligentsia. I've had the opportunity to speak with leaders in the economy from Tsinghua University. Tsinghua is a tremendous center for producing business education. At Renmin Da Shui, which is also the largest Marxist university, where I lectured last week. We are finding amongst intellectuals a real vibrancy for the ideas. And so this is something I want to say about what we do in Hawaii. We're not moving forward in Grassroot by putting personalities forward or just slogans. We're actually bringing good ideas to the table. And Jay, I have to thank you because Ehana Kako is able to be part of ThinkTech Hawaii, which is really the forum for good ideas in the state of Hawaii. And here in China, change is being driven by intellectuals who are taking good ideas and saying, we've got to translate those ideas into practices of the people. And so I'm very pleased to be part of this relationship with the equivalent, with our sister organization in Beijing. And they really love our title, our name, Grassroot Institute, because the largest form of grass is bamboo. So jokingly, I say we are the Bamboo Institute of China.
Well, alliances are everything, Kelii. And second only to breaks. We're going to take a short break now. This is Ehana Kako with Kelii Akina in Shenzhen and Malia Blom Hill.
That's right.
In Washington. And we're going to take a short break. We'll be right back. Aloha. I'm Jay Fidell of ThinkTech. ThinkTech is a 501c3 Hawaii nonprofit corporation. We began ThinkTech in the year 2000. At ThinkTech, we work to raise public awareness about tech, energy diversification, and globalism in Hawaii. We do 20 live stream talk shows every business day, and we do a weekly TV show on OC16. We pay the bills with donations from our supporters. Won't you help us by making a donation? All you need to do is go to our website, thinktechhawaii.com, and click there on the Donate button. We hope that you like what we do and that you will support us and help us continue to do it. Thanks so much for watching and for helping. I'm Jay Fidell of ThinkTech. Mahalo. We're back. We're live in Ehana Kako here on the ThinkTech series. And we have our leader for Ehana Kako and the Grassroot Institute, Kelii Akina in Shenzhen, China, Malia Blom Hill in Washington, D.C., straddling the globe here on ThinkTech. Wonderful. So, Kelii, what's your next thought on bringing Grassroot in China version, or rather episode number 3?
Well, what has been really exciting is to see that the cause for which we stand in Grassroot, which is individual liberty, free markets, limited accountability, limited and accountable government, is a cause that has really gripped the hearts of many Chinese intellectuals, business people, thinkers, university people, and they are organizing in groups like the Grassroot Institute. As I mentioned in the previous section of our program, the Unirule Institute for Economics is a free market think tank in Beijing, and they're doing a great job. Let me tell you why they're important. They have a smart way, an intelligent way of bringing about social change in China. They don't start with the issue of human rights. They don't start with things that are sensitive politically to the government. They start with the idea that change can come about if we can give the government an incentive. And they recognize that the strongest incentives for government will be economic. And this is a very important concept. I speak with a lot of people who are promoters of important social causes in Hawaii, who have values, who are ideologically driven. And I find myself over and over realizing that whatever cause they promote, whether it is individual liberty, human rights, religious liberty, or whatever it is, it's more likely to gain ascendancy if they can come to the table and say, here, we can solve our economic problem this way. We can increase the financial prosperity of everybody. We can put more money into government so that they can tax people less and be more efficient. I mean, if you can answer those questions, you create the willingness for change on other issues. And that's the strategy of Unirule, and they have become well respected. In fact, the most respected report on the macroeconomic condition of China is the quarterly briefing of Unirule. Go on the website, Unirule Institute for Economics, download their quarterly briefings. You'll have the latest and the best, least biased information about the economy of China. And it's by doing this hard work of a think tank that they gain respect and are able to propose, here is a better way to do the economy, and thus here's a better way to serve society. And the net result is not only that you have free markets, you have the basis for free markets, the rule of law, and you have the foundation of the rule of law, the respect of the individual. Malia, so when are you going to have our first quarterly economic report on the economy of Hawaii?
Well, I can give it in like 2 words right now.
Jones Act.
You actually raised something that I hear a lot, and your work with think tanks there has made me want to ask you about this, which is, when we talk about China from here in the United States, especially organizations that are concerned with human rights, but even Grassroot Institute, where we talk a lot about liberty, we also mean individual liberty. And so the question, and it's something of a philosophical one, is when you're carrying that message, if you're only carrying part of it successfully, are you really just bolstering the ability of the government there to take one part, economic freedom, strengthen their position because of it, and ignore the other part, individual liberty? Is there really hope that you are chiseling away at that, or are we fooling ourselves? Because the promoters of individual liberty, anyone who has an issue always wants it to be fixed immediately, whether it's Jones Act or anything else. But promoters of individual liberty will say, you don't really get, it's not something that can be divided. They come together, they work together. It's all an integrated philosophy. So how is it that the people you've met with there sort of respond to that kind of idea?
That's a great question. The fact is, good principles are always integrated with other good principles. So if you do implement good free market principles, you necessarily are bringing other principles to the table. One of the common questions is, how can we get the rest of China to be more like Hong Kong? And so I love to answer that question because it's a question people are actually asking. And when I answer that question, I always start with what Hong Kong is. If you want to be like Hong Kong, then you want a free market. In order to have free markets, you have to have the rule of law. You have to protect businesses from criminals, and you have to protect businesses from the government. If you want the rule of law, then you need to have human value. And you see, when people get serious enough about the free market, and the benefits of the free market, they bring the rest along. Free market principles are like a Trojan horse. And whether they are implemented in Hawaii or Washington, D.C., or Detroit, or in Beijing, they're going to bring with them the other principles needed for a free market, which is the rule of law, which ultimately has to be human value. And so this is the way in which you move forward. If you go the other route and start at the bottom and talk about human rights or human value, you completely dissuade the powers that be from taking any moves. So I really believe that an incremental approach is important, but one other very important value, we must give incentive. We're free market economists. We believe in competition. We believe in free market competition. We believe in the idea that punishment hurts and praise is something we like. And people work for rewards and they avoid punishment. So the whole concept of incentive is important. If you have a philosophy, you owe it to your philosophy to learn how to win. The way you win with your philosophy is by giving other people incentives. And that's what good economic policy does. That's why my hat goes off to these wonderful guys who are working at Unirule Institute for Economics in China. We would have the current president with us this morning, but he, on the phone this morning, told me that he'd been breathing too much Beijing air, and now he has a respiratory problem, and so he's in bed this morning. My hat's off to you. His name is Mao, and we call him lovingly Chairman Mao. So when you see this Chairman Mao,
the one thing that strikes me from what you say, and I'm just being a gadfly here, is that Grassroot Institute, and for that matter, it certainly sounds like Unirule, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, believe in the free market. But China is not necessarily a free marketplace. It's a strong central government, and lest we forget, it's at the core, it's communist. And so, what is the entry point where Unirule and Unirule in an alliance with Grassroot can actually, be compatible with the Politburo? How does that work? Where do you find common ground?
This is a wonderful question, because it by understanding how difficult China's situation is, we actually gain hope in Hawaii. Well, we realize, if they can find some way, we can find some way. And basically, the thing we need to keep in mind is change doesn't have to happen, and rarely does happen, from the top down. When I was at the University of Hawaii, I noticed something very interesting. There was at one point a free speech zone that was in the campus center. It was about an area of about 50 feet by 50 feet, and you could go into the free speech zone and say anything you wanted to say, and were immune from any kind of prosecution. And I used to laugh at that. And it was established, obviously, in the 60s, a free speech zone in the United States of America. And so I thought, well, what is the rest of Hawaii? What is those boundaries actually define the fact that the rest of the nation is not a free speech zone if you can only have free speech within a 50 by 50 little area. But I laugh at that, but I'm reminded of this by what China is doing. You see, if there is a way not to threaten the powers that be, then that way is worth pursuing. So in China, the way not to threaten the powers that be is to say, here, we're going to cordon off a region in Shanghai, and we're going to take our hands off of the protectionism. We're going to protect international investment when it comes in. We're going to let the free market guys structure ways of carrying out free market enterprise so that supply and demand rule, and that the pricing is not affected by the government. And we can do that in this little region without changing China. That is both the hope and the Trojan horse. Because you see, when you get enough of these free economic zones going, China is not going to say, turn it off. And this is precisely the case with Hong Kong. Hong Kong is their premier free economic zone or special economic zone. Now, China is trying to tamper with it. And in 2010, the unions pushed a measure hoping to curry the favor of the communists, which is they got a minimum wage law in Hong Kong, which Hong Kong businessmen and women opposed vehemently, but it at least showed that they're able to tamper, which is what the government wanted to know, that they still had some kind of control. But do you think that China is going in any way to turn off the economic engine of Hong Kong? They will not. Instead, they are starting to copy it elsewhere. And so what hope that gives to us in Hawaii is this, and this is what I say to my fellow soldiers and warriors who are trying to fight the Jones Act, or who are trying to fight concepts that are dear and special to the powers that be. We don't have to dismantle the powers that be. We don't have to threaten the powers that be, and we have to give them some kind of incentive. This is very, very important. And the best way to give the powers that be an incentive is to show them an economic model that will produce greater results than they are already getting, so that they can actually get credit for this, and they can actually accomplish some of the fiscal goals that they want to accomplish. And there's a group that produces some of the criteria for doing this. It's called the American Legislative, Malia, what does ALEC stand for? Don't tell me what SourceWatch tells us they stand for, but what does the acronym stand for?
No, I'm going to miss the C because I always do. The American Legislative Exchange Commission.
Yes, a commission. I don't think they're a commission.
Committee. See, that C, it gets me every time. But
here's what they do.
Council.
They look.
Council. Sorry.
Council. There you go. They're council. They look at all 50 states, and they analyze all the fiscal policies of those 50 states. Everything from general excise tax to corporate tax rates, to the extent to which government regulates small business. They analyze all of these factors, and then they compare them to gross domestic product. They compare them to output, and they come up with a list of states ranked 50 to 0 or 50 to 1 in terms of these best practices, and they've identified best practices. Well, you see, we can easily introduce some of these best practices to Hawaii without threatening the powers that be. The best practices are able to generate the kinds of return that governments want to have, and so they have an incentive. So to take my long answer and make it really short, number one, we learned from China, you don't have to end the central control in order to start the virus of free market economics. Number two, free market economic principles can provide a tremendous incentive to any form of government, even our form of government in Hawaii, to be able to achieve what it wants to achieve, and as a result, the people achieve what they need to achieve. And I think an intelligent approach is to move forward in this way. What are your thoughts about that, Jay? Does that sound a little more intelligent?
Well, I put myself in the shoes of an official, and that official is affected by the same vectors that we were talking about earlier, the same constituents, the same demands by the same power structure. And so I have a kind of dichotomy there. And on the one hand, I say, yes, Kelii, yes, Malia, I agree with you. The economic model you described is a much better model. And in a perfect world, I would certainly adopt that model. But here I am, and I'm all strung up like Gulliver. You know, I'm tied to my origins, my political origins. I'm tied to the people I owe something to. So while I agree with you on an intellectual level, I'm not sure that I can, from a practical point of view, take action on the basis of that agreement, or even admit it in public, because I am the product of who put me in office. So how do you bridge that gap?
Well, you know, you don't have to take the whole kit and caboodle. That's why. That's how we idealists we who have a certain approach to the free market, those of us who love it, have to understand that change is incremental. And by incremental, I don't mean slow. I mean it has to be in increments that provide incentive to the powers that be. Give you an example. One of the other issues that ultimately affects the economy in a huge way, but doesn't look economic at first, but another issue that is dear to us at Grassroot is allowing taxpayers to have greater choice in the way they spend their tax dollars on educating their own children. And that's an important value from a liberty point of view, in terms also of the fact that my dollar that I have earned with my labor of my body belongs to me. And also as a father and a mother with my wife, we have a duty and a responsibility and a privilege to be able to determine how our children should be educated. Now, I believe in all of those things. Other people may not believe in them. But you see, we can give the state an incentive by showing that the issue of greater school choice is not a politically partisan issue. And that's one of the things Grassroot has been working on. We have found that, do you realize that the majority of Democrat legislators send their children to private schools rather than public schools? And the Democratic Party is the majority party in Hawaii. Do you realize not a single one of those Democrats is being compensated for the money they are spending out of their own pockets to pay for Punahou or Iolani or St. Louis or Marinol and so forth? They have a vested interest in being able to determine how some of their own tax dollars are spent. And we have actually gotten some friends who are Democrats who are now talking with us and are interested in measures of greater school choice. So Jay, the issue is, let's not go after the whole kit and caboodle. Let's find particular items that we can depoliticize and deal with as real issues of the people for bringing about change. Malia, you've been with us. You're with us in strategizing these approaches. Yeah. So how does this sound to you?
Well, it sounds dead on, and it's partly about common ground, and then partly being cynical, and it's partly about where those vested interests lie. To some extent, they lie in staying in political power. And that doesn't come from a purely cynical thing. I think that with obvious exceptions, most people who hold political power believe that want to do the best for their whatever it is they represent, the people they represent. But we talk about China and how do they match up this impetus for change versus how they got to where they are and the whole culture that supports them. Well, history shows us Gorbachev had to face the same problem. King John of England had to face the same problem and signed the Magna Carta. In the end,
Jay, I was just going to say, Jay, you knew King John of England, didn't you?
He was a dear friend.
Go ahead.
He was a dear friend.
Let's go ahead,
I want to assure you he was not a relative.
All right, very good. Malia, I cut you off. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I was name dropping. But the point being that, in these great seminal moments, and I think when we're talking about China and we're talking about individual liberty, it happens, who knows when it will happen, but we're talking about something that is a huge moment in history at the point that someone looks at it and says, we have to make these changes. We have to embrace these big changes. They happen very slow and then they happen very fast all of a sudden, as anyone who, can remember 1989 can attest. And it comes from looking at what you're facing and what's best for your country or your state or whatever, and the whole impetus of history and philosophy and belief that's coming at you. And at that moment in time, whether it's a big issue or a little issue, as a politician, you make the decision, am I going to go with this? Am I going to go with where the people want me to go? Am I going to go with what will keep me in power or keep my head or whatever? Or am I going to step out of the way? Am I going to try to hold on to it? And history has not been kind to people who don't sort of follow that movement of ideas. So,
Kelii, can you summarize where we are on this? Because it sounds to me like this is a conversation that is really important, and you should have this conversation on an ongoing basis. But for now, I think we have to summarize and close.
Well, I think that we can learn great lessons from watching the way China is struggling with its problems. This is not to say that China has learned to answer these problems, but we need to be observing the problems that we have in Hawaii being dealt with at the scale they exist in China. And one of the things that we can learn is that change doesn't have to be about changing an entire system instantly. And when we step back from that goal or articulated goal, we make it safer for the powers that be to allow a process of change, which is to start small changes that go viral, such as special economic zones, or as we're suggesting in Hawaii, particular industry exemptions for Jones Act and so forth. And as we do this, we also want to make it safe for those who are jockeying for power. In the Communist Party now, the future is on the minds of anyone who's under 40 or who's under 50.
Kalii, we'll have to leave it there. We're really out of time. But thank you so much for this great discussion. Kelii Akina,
very good.
Hanukkah Ko, and Malia Blom Hill from Washington, Kelii from Shenzhen today.
Shenzhen.
Are you coming back next week?
Yes, I am. I'll be back in Hawaii on the 8th or 9th of this month, December.
Okay, we look forward to seeing you, and Malia looks forward to seeing you on Skype that's a little closer. What can I say? Aloha, you guys. Thanks very much. See you soon.
Aloha. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Take care.
Shei,
Zaijian.
Zaijian.